Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 Washington County Board of Commissioners meeting. Clerk Moss, could you do us the honors?
Yes, thank you, Chair Harrington. The Washington County Board of Commissioners, also meeting as the Board of Directors for Clean Water Services and all other county service districts, is now meeting this regular session, December 13th, 2022. Commissioner Fye?
Present.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Treese?
Here.
Vice Chair Willie?
Here.
Chair Harrington?
Here. And I want to welcome everyone who's here in our audience. It's really nice to get back to having folks here in person. So the next item on our agenda is public communication. Clerk Moss, do we have anyone who wishes to speak with us this evening?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. First up, we have Dale Feek. Dale?
Kevin, please don't start the time. Would you distribute those books first, please?
Excuse me, just 1 minute. Did you see in the chat, Mr. Moss?
Yes, I did, and yeah, he should be able to hear now because the room is unmuted. Yep. So this is, and I'll deal with the other issue.
More books. Mr. Feek, I'm going to spend all my vacation reading books you've given us.
That is my goal.
Oh, but this is the book I already have.
Yeah, you didn't get one just now.
That's because you've given me a copy already.
Correct.
A funny thing happened on the way to extinction.
Thank you. Madam Chair Harrington and Nafisa Fye, Jerry Willie, Pam Treese, and Roy Rogers, esteemed commissioners. I'm Dale Feek, spokesperson for Washington County Citizen Action Network. At the Forest Grove City Council Monday night, I gave new Mayor Melinda Wenzel, Councilor Lena Ewig, and she's the city sustainability liaison, and Timothy Rippey asked, does anybody want a book? And he said, I do. So Timothy Rippey, who ran against Wenzel, also took a book. Mayor Steve Calloway, I gave his book to him yesterday. I was a little concerned when I first read this book, and mine is Well Worn, by John Patterson, because there wasn't an index in it. And so what John Patterson did is he gave me a CD of the entire book, and I can use it any way I want. I have written permission to do so. So I talked with Chuck, and Chuck is putting digitalized, and it'll be then on the web page, and you'll get it. And the advantage of that is you can search. And so I searched for solar panels, and I searched for trees. And you know, what it says in the book, of course, I've studied the book, but the idea is don't cut down big trees just to put solar panels on. You get more benefit from the big trees than you do solar panels. So there are a lot of little tidbits in there like that, okay? And you can search for them as well, read the book from front to cover. Front to cover? Front to back, I guess, whatever it is. I don't see a timer. Oh, it's not up there. Well, please take a look at the inside front cover. James Hansen and I communicate with each other. He wrote it a forward to the book, and I also quoted in there what he quoted on the last email that he sent out, and has to do with China. And Roy Rogers, Commissioner Rogers, you talked about China, and please address that. And I gave you the China book, because this has been interpreted in Chinese, because they realized how important it was, and they interpreted it there.
No, I can't read any of that, Dale.
Well, I know it, but I'm hoping that somebody it's going to be digitalized now, and on the webpage you can translate it. Maybe somebody can translate it. I've had somebody, anyway, I'm done. So, thank you. You have your books, signed reading over the...
Dale, I have to let you know that I can't get one of those big trees on my roof, so I have solar on there. Is that okay?
Yes.
You said the big trees are better than solar, didn't you?
What I said was, if you make a choice, John Patterson would say, don't cut down the big trees that give you shade. to put solar panels on. Don't do that. You'll get more benefit from the carbon sequestration of the big tree than a solar panel producing photovoltaic electricity.
Okay.
That's explanation. Thanks for asking the question.
Thank you, Dale. Next, Chair Harrington, we have Doug Lund. Doug?
Good evening. My name is Douglas Lund. I'm representing the American Legion Post 6 here in Hillsboro. The American Legion is the largest veteran service organization in America. Before you and to the actual board clerk, I submitted to you all 2 resolutions that the Hillsboro American Legion Post 6 passed last week. This week, we are going to be debating these resolutions and other actions with the Tigard Post, the Beaverton Post, the Aloha Post, the Forest Grove Post, the Banks Post, Sherwood Post, and most of the other posts from the northwest part of Oregon. First measure, whereas the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, whereas all members of the American Legion have taken an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and bear true faith and allegiance to the same, whereas all elected officials and officers are required to take an oath to support and uphold the Constitution of the United States, whereas the Constitution of the United States guarantees our civil rights and states the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, whereas the Oregon Constitution, Article 1, Section 27, also guarantees our civil right that the people shall have the right to bear arms, whereas violating a person's civil rights is a criminal felony offense under Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242, whereas Measure 114 violates both the United States and Oregon constitutions, whereas supporting Measure 114 violates the public oaths of office to our constitutions. Therefore, be it resolved, the American Legion Post 6 opposes any support or enforcement of Measure 114. The second resolution is where the American Legion, since the 1930s, has published books and educating America on the domestic enemies of the Constitution, and we are now going to identify those enemies of the Constitution, and follow-on action, primarily education, will ensue. Any questions?
This is your opportunity to address us, not the other way around.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lund? That takes care of our in-person in the room. Next, we'll move to our online, and we have Mr. Jim Long first up. Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Please go ahead for up to 2 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to see you all. Members, I'm the chair of CPO-4M. Members of CPO-4M discussed the newly proposed dog park in Metzger Park at our Thanksgiving Eve meeting. Many of the attendees were surprised to learn a dog park is being considered there. The following questions about a dog park proposed at Metzger Park were raised by the members who were seeking answers. Why do no or very few taxpaying members of the Metzger LID Improvement District know about the survey? Is it a valid survey? We understand that dog parks should not be within 100 yards of children's play structures. How would this work at Metzger Park? We also understand the American Kennel Club recommends that public dog parks be not less than a half acre for dogs to run around in. What kind of ADA access would be available at the proposed dog park? Why have cost estimates already been requested or secured for a total budget for the dog park? Aren't there ordinances about both noise and proximity to nearby residences? The existing trees support a wildlife corridor. Wildlife needs trees. During this era of climate change, why remove tall, beautiful trees? Dogs are not always good neighbors with trees. Why impact the natural park from potential damage from dog feces and urine? And this relates to the Clean Water Services part of the park. Would this proposal go through a standard land use review process? The drafting of this letter was approved unanimously by CPO membership with one abstention from someone who wants more information. Thanks for responding to our questions and providing a presentation to our CPO.
And for the board's information, I did receive Mr. Long's information while we were in work session today, and I forwarded it to Ms. Angie for handling.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Would any other members of our online viewing attendee wish to provide public comment on any county-related topic for up to 2 minutes? Give you just a minute to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any additional hands, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, and this being the last meeting of the year and a short month of meetings, we have a long consent agenda today. We have 2 sets of minutes, 2 items from Clean Water Services, 9 items from Health and Human Services. They get the prize for the most. 1 item from Finance, 6 items from Land Use and Transportation, and 2 items from Human Resources. What are the wishes of the commission?
Move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting today's consent agenda, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next, we'll move on to board and commission appointments, and we have 3 different items today. The first is to appoint members to the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And the Public Safety Coordinating Council is recommending the following appointments for their membership to the PSCC. Todd Schaefer for reappointment, Susan Pudzenda and Rachel Schultz also to fill the 3 community lay member positions for the upcoming term of January 1, 2023 through the end of the year, December 31, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Clerk Moss, I wasn't sure what to do without you there. Yes, it was. I was paying attention. Next, we have a slate of folks to appoint to the 2023-2024 Salary Commission. We have a recommendation to reappoint Casey Koronek, Heike Kirkendall Baker, Brianna Condem for terms ending December 31, 2024, and to make new appointments of Christian Calderon, Monica Santoya, and Victor Zambrano as the alternate for terms expiring December 31, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. The third item is to announce vacancies and to authorize the recruitment of applicants through January 24th of 2023, so over the next month or 6 weeks, or until all vacancies are filled. So we have 22 different committees where we have vacancies coming up. Now, some of the current members may choose to reapply, but we really value the time and expertise that community members volunteer to serve on these various boards and commissions in service to the community of Washington County. They include open positions for the Advisory Council on Racial Equity, also known as ACRE, Aging and Veteran Services Advisory Council, the Audit Committee, the Behavioral Health Council, the Civil Service Commission, the Columbia Pacific Economic Development District, also known as COLPAC, Commissioner Willie serves on that, Developmental Disabilities Council, the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol, and Combined Urban Road Maintenance District Budget Committee. That's 2 different special districts, 1 combined budget committee. The Fair Board, the Fairgrounds Advisory Committee, the Farm Board of Review, the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee, the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee, the Housing Advisory Committee, the Housing Advisory Board of Directors, the Metzger Park Local Improvement District Advisory Board, the North Bethany County Service District for Roads Budget Committee, the Northwest Area Commission on Transportation, Northwest Act, the Park and Recreation Advisory Board, the Rural Roads Operations and Maintenance Advisory Committee, also known as ROMAC, the Urban Road Maintenance District Advisory Committee, URMDAC, and the combined Washington County and Service District Lighting Number 1 Budget Committee. 22 committees in all, and a lot of positions on each of those committees. So I've announced the vacancies, and commissioners, I would ask for a motion to authorize the recruitment of applicants through the date of January 24th, 2023, or until all vacancies are filled.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, and you can find more information about those board and committees on our Washington County website, washingtoncountyor.gov, and do a search for boards and commissions. You might find it under departments. It's a slick new website. Check it out. Next on our agenda are presentations, and tonight we have one presentation with multiple follow-up audits from the independently elected auditor, John Hutzler. Is John with us tonight?
He is not in the room. He is online. Should turn on his camera momentarily. Can you hear us, Mr. Hutzler? Auditor Hutzler, are you there? There you are. I just need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Harrington, Commissioners, Ms. Angie and other county staff, and Washington County residents. My name is John Hutzler. It's been my honor to serve as your Washington County Auditor for the past 12 years. This is the last time I'll speak to you as County Auditor in a meeting of your board, and I'm here tonight to report on the status of 50 recommendations from 7 audits performed by my office in recent years. That's a lot to cover, and I'll try to be brief. But before addressing each of those audits, I'd like to speak to you about the importance of audit follow-up. Follow-up on audit recommendations is not only required by audit standards, it's also essential to accomplishing positive change. Performance auditors are catalysts for change, but they have no authority to implement the actions they recommend. In fact, auditing standards prohibit them from doing so. In today's complex environment, it's all too easy for management to say, "Oh yes, we'll get right on that," only to be distracted by more pressing concerns, such as the onset of a global pandemic. Auditors are truly effective only if management implements audit recommendations, and follow-up is key to ensuring that happens. Audit follow-up requires patience and persistence. There is no prescribed method, and audit shops differ in how soon, how often, and how long they check and report on the status of recommendations. Many shops simply ask management to state whether or not it implemented each recommendation and then report what management says. I've found it more effective to let management know that I will not report that they have implemented a recommendation without hard evidence, and to follow up on audit recommendations up to 3 times or 5 years. Next slide, please. I approach the end of my third term as the longest serving elected auditor in the region. I took the opportunity to examine the most recent reports on the status of audit recommendations from my colleagues, the auditors of Multnomah County, the City of Portland, and Metro. The percent of audit recommendations implemented by management ranged from 36% in Portland to 71% in Multnomah County. I've followed up on 159 audit recommendations over the past 12 years, and Washington County administration has implemented 80% of those recommendations. Next slide, please. I'll be reporting to you tonight on the status of recommendations from the following 7 audits. Our audit of the Bonnie Hayes Small Animal Shelter, county management of the emergency ambulance franchise, the county's ethics hotline, the solicitation of developer proposals for projects supported by the Metro Affordable Housing Bond, county payment card security, county management and disposition of surplus real property, and county planning to replace departing employees. I will try to be brief, but I'm aware that some of you may not be familiar with audits performed before you joined the board or the county. I will pause after each report to give you the opportunity to ask questions or offer comments. Next slide, please. This is our second follow-up of the audit of the Bonnie Hayes Small Animal Shelter. In our 2019 report, we found that while the shelter had improved its live release rate from 50% to 95% over the previous decade, it did not provide the minimum level of acceptable care for animals housed in the shelter. We made 9 recommendations to improve compliance with industry standards of care. I'm pleased to report that the animal shelter manager has fully implemented all but one of the 8 recommendations for improvements in animal care, and facilities is prioritizing in its master planning process an evaluation of the animal shelter for possible replacement or renovation. The animal shelter is essentially a detention facility. Commissioner Rogers is probably the only one here who will recall that I came to Washington County over 30 years ago to help the county plan the replacement of an outdated and seriously overcrowded county jail that could not provide the minimum level of acceptable care for adults in custody. To ensure that a new jail would accommodate the county's needs for at least 20 years, it's now been 30, county leaders recognized that 2 things determine the population of any detention facility: the numbers coming in and how long they stay. To limit the population of the facility to its capacity, one must control one, or preferably both of those things. Over the past 10 years, the shelter has cut the average length of stay for dogs almost in half through aggressive programs to return lost dogs to their owners as soon as possible. Dogs must be licensed, so their owners are generally known. Cats are a different matter, and it's more difficult to reduce their length of stay in the shelter, particularly once you've adopted a no-kill philosophy of animal care and no longer send most cats to the incinerator. Animal Services has learned that its existing facility is not suitable for the long-term care. To provide quality care, the shelter must control its population within the capacity of the facility, and to do that, it can no longer accept all comers. Today, the shelter operates essentially as an intake facility to the larger system of animal care in the county. It partners with other animal care facilities and organizations that are better equipped to provide longer-term care and to adopt or foster animals to new homes. As such, its capacity to accept animals, and particularly cats, is limited by the ability of its partners to house them until they are adopted. If the community wants a full-service county animal shelter, it will probably need to support replacing the existing facility with one suited to providing the longer-term care required to prepare animals for adoption and find them new homes. Next slide, please. I invite your comments or questions on this report, which closes out this audit.
Board, any questions or comments? There are none. Auditor Hutzler.
Next slide, please. In our 2019 audit of county management of the emergency ambulance franchise, we found that the county was not holding the franchisee to its obligations to dispatch an ambulance within 60 seconds of receiving a call, and was also falsely reporting that the franchisee met all contract requirements. The county had only recently sustained a $10 million judgment for the wrongful death of a young woman in the county jail because it failed to hold its jail healthcare provider to the terms of its contract. And we saw mismanagement of the ambulance agreement as a risk. We recommended that the county hold the franchisee to its agreement and amend the dispatch standard set by administrative rule only through the established process for amendment, which required a public hearing. Unfortunately, the county has not done so. The 60-second standard remains, but is not enforced. This exposes the county to the risk of lawsuits for death or injury that might result from the franchisee's failure to timely dispatch an ambulance. Instead, the county has engaged in a convoluted process that appears to be designed to eventually eliminate the 60-second dispatch standard without providing county residents the opportunity to express their views on the matter in a public hearing. Management did not implement 3 of the 5 recommendations made in the 29 report. Next slide, please. Any questions or comments?
Commissioners, any question or comments? Nope, none here, Auditor Hutzler.
Next slide, please. In 2010, the Oregon legislature passed a law allowing governments to create hotlines for reporting government waste, inefficiency, and abuse. Shortly after taking office in 2011, I initiated discussions with the county administrator's office regarding the development of a Washington County hotline. In our neighboring jurisdictions, hotlines were established within the office of the independent elected auditor. However, in 2011, the Washington County Auditor's Office was a one-person shop, and I had neither the staff nor the resources to manage the hotline. The CAO proposed, and I agreed, that the CAO would administer the hotline with regular reporting to the auditor. In 2016, we examined the CAO's implementation of the ethics hotline. We made 8 recommendations for action to satisfy the requirements of state law, to improve compliance with county policies and procedures, and to improve the effectiveness of the hotline. I'm able to report that the county has fully implemented or partially implemented all of those recommendations. In the course of my follow-up work, however, I identified additional matters of even greater concern, including hotline procedures issued by the county administrative office that are inconsistent with the board policy, investigations not being timely completed, inconsistent case processing and case outcomes, violations of hotline confidentiality, and what appears to be a cover-up of a hotline report involving a member of your board. The details of these concerns are included in my report, which is in your packet. The seriousness of these matters prompts me to urge you to transfer the hotline to my successor and to create a county ombuds officer position within the office of the independent elected county auditor to administer the program and conduct investigations. Completion of this report was delayed by the county administrator's denial of auditor access to hotline records and personnel. Next slide, please. Comments or questions?
I'm not seeing any here, Auditor Hutzler.
Next slide, please. In 2018, voters approved a ballot measure authorizing Metro to issue $652.8 million in bonds to support regional affordable housing needs. $116 million was designated for housing in Washington County. In 2020, the county issued a Notice of Funding Availability, or a NOFA, for 80 of the $116 million, inviting developers to submit proposals for affordable housing projects, which would then have to be approved by Metro for funding. Our audit examined whether the county's first NOFA was likely to elicit proposals that Metro would approve for funding. We found that the NOFA was generally well written, but would be strengthened by language that explicitly expressed that the county would prioritize projects sponsored by culturally specific organizations, or in which such organizations have a significant role in project design and project operations. Management agreed with our recommendations and repeatedly committed to explicitly including such language in the next NOFA. I reviewed that document and found that although it doubles the points scored for racial equity, it does not explicitly express this county preference. While management feels that doubling the points for racial equity will accomplish the same result, I was not in a position to evaluate that, since this was only a follow-up project and proposals had not yet even been submitted. Since management had no plans to amend the NOFA, I closed the recommendation as not implemented. Next slide, please. Any comments or questions?
I'm not seeing any here, Auditor Hutzler.
Thank you. Next slide, please. In our 2019 audit of payment card security, we found that although the county has been attesting every year that it complied fully with the payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS, this was not true, and the county had been falsely reporting that it had performed the required testing to support its attestation of compliance. We recommended that responsibility for testing what are essentially information system security controls be transferred to Information Technology Services, and that ITS perform all required testing of security controls before attesting that the county is in compliance. In his first attestation in 2020, the Chief Information Officer conceded that the county was not in compliance, and the county paid over $11,000 in penalties. In 2021 and 2022, the CIO reported that the county was in compliance, although ITS did not complete all of the required testing. In this final follow-up, I found that management had fully or partially implemented 6 of the 7 original recommendations. However, I also cautioned the Chief Information Officer or any county official asked to execute a PCI DSS attestation to seek the advice of legal counsel on whether executing a false attestation might constitute fraud. Next slide, please. Any comments or questions on the follow-up of data card security?
Not seeing any here, Auditor Hutzler.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Property that government owns but has no use for is considered surplus property. Washington County receives no benefit from owning surplus real property, but incurs costs to manage and maintain them, is unable to levy taxes on those parcels, and assumes the risks and liabilities of a property owner. It's generally in the public interest to dispose of such properties as quickly as possible and return them to the tax rolls. In 2019, we audited real property management to determine whether it was satisfying legal requirements for the disposition of county surplus property and whether it was accomplishing program objectives efficiently and effectively. We made 13 recommendations to improve compliance with legal requirements and to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the program. In this final follow-up, I can report that management has fully or partially implemented all of those audit recommendations. Next slide, please. Any comments or questions on this audit?
None here, Auditor Hutzler.
Next slide, please. Every organization needs good leadership and sufficient well-trained staff to carry out its mission. As leaders and staff depart through retirement, resignation, or termination, organizations must replace them. Succession planning involves assessing and forecasting workforce needs by identifying critical positions and developing competencies to meet those needs. In this 2021 audit, we found that Washington County faces significant staff turnover in the coming years, but succession planning for workforce replacements was deficient. We made 6 recommendations for improvement. Management agreed with all of our recommendations and planned to implement most of them by July 2022. In this follow-up, I found that all 6 recommendations remain in process. Management reports that its response to the COVID-19 pandemic has delayed implementation of these recommendations. Next slide, please. Any comments or questions on succession planning?
None here, Auditor Hutzler.
Next slide, please. When I took office 12 years ago, the concept of audit follow-up was foreign to county administration and not particularly well received. One of my proudest accomplishments as county auditor has been to ingrain in the culture of Washington County government that the auditor will follow up and report to your board and the public on whether management has followed through on its commitments to address identified risks by implementing audit recommendations. Of the 50 recommendations I've reported on today, management has already implemented 76%, with more to come. I appreciate all 3 of the county administrators with whom I've served over the past 12 years for their attention to the recommendations of the county auditor. Next slide, please. As you know, I only regained control of my confidential audit records about 3 months ago. With no audit staff and 9 projects to complete before leaving office, it's been a stressful time, but I'm happy to be able to close out all but the 3 most recent audits. I want to thank the management and staff of Health and Human Services, Animal Services, Housing Services, Finance, Information Technology Services, Facilities and Park Services, Human Resources, and the County Administrative Office for their cooperation and support. I could not have completed these projects without you. Next slide, please. All 7 of these reports are available in the agenda for this meeting and will soon be posted to the auditor's webpage. Next slide, please. I'd be happy to answer and to address any questions you may have, but I see there are none. Before I leave office, in my 19 years with Washington County, I've worked with at least 20 commissioners. Your board has worked harder than any on behalf of the people of Washington County. And before I leave office, I want to thank each member of your board for your service to our community. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to share?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say to Auditor Hutzler, it's been a pleasure serving with you the last couple of years, I would say. I know we didn't get to work together, but thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So on behalf of the board, I will say thank you, Auditor Hutzler, for your 12 years of service as the independently elected auditor here at Washington County. Auditor Hutzler was first elected in May of 2010 and took office in January of 2011. And as he highlighted, established a culture process in the auditor's office of not only doing the audits, but having follow-up audits. He was re-elected twice in May of 2014 and May of 2018, adding up to his 12 years, 3 terms as the independently elected county auditor. And thank you, sir, for your service, and we wish you all a happy holiday.
Thank you.
Good luck in your new life chapter.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on from the presentation section of the agenda to the action section. And tonight's meeting, we have 3 different items. The first comes to us from our great government relations team for adoption of the county and the Clean Water Services 2023 state legislative agenda and the 2023 federal legislative agenda. And I would like to recognize the Senior Government Relations Manager for Washington County, Aaron Doyle, and the Senior Policy Analyst at Clean Water Services, Tracy Rainey, to present this information for everyone's benefit.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good evening, Board of Washington County Commissioners. I am Erin Doyle, your Senior Government Relations Manager.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Harrington, members of the Board of Clean Water Services. I am Tracy Rainey, Senior Policy Analyst for Clean Water Services.
Yep, user error. We just really quickly wanted to run through at this board meeting before you take action on this item what the federal and state agendas entail. This slide represents kind of the high-level overview of what is included in the federal agenda. For the county in particular, we start with an introduction of the goals that you have and how you serve your community and the needs that we have in order to accomplish that. We try to update that introduction every year as we have changing priorities, we have changing needs, and this year reflects a much more robust conversation with our federal partners on what we need. And then the county provides guiding principles and we'll get into those in a moment. And then the section for Clean Water Services is also included within the draft. They provide an introduction of who they are, their guiding principles and priorities, and then finally contact information for your board, your government relations teams that are internal to both agencies and our Van Scoyoc lobby partners for both the county and Clean Water Services. And I'm not going to read all of this to you, I promise. Neither one of these slides will be read in their fullness. They are included in the agenda, which was also included in the packet. This first slide is the first set of principles. As we've discussed with your board at multiple work sessions, we use principles that allow us the flexibility to react to the federal legislative process, which works a little more esoterically than the state legislative process. This provides us with the ability to reply to our legislative delegation quickly when they provide legislative proposals, as well as put in information that supports these goals or changes policies, makes recommendations as they work through their federal legislative process and budgets. This is the second set of principles because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of things the federal government can do with us. For 2023, we have updated some of the principles from the 2022 and 2021 legislative agendas, reflecting the ongoing work that the federal branch has done. We have also added, per your guidance, a workforce principle reflecting your ongoing desire to see more investments coming out of the federal government for creating community opportunities for pathways to living and family wage jobs. So with that, I'll turn it to Tracy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for the Clean Water Services federal principles, and again, I think very similar to the county, these are the items that more broadly capture our areas of interest and potential impact in areas where we anticipate that we'll likely engage in some advocacy with our federal delegation in the coming year. Many of these principles are similar to what we had shared with you in the last federal legislative agenda process in 2022. We did update that using kind of our internal team and conversations to really truly reflect any appropriate updates, emerging issues that we're seeing, and make sure that we are well positioned to be responsive. I will say, I think one of the key messages coming through is we did see unprecedented funding in water infrastructure in 2021, which was really great news and probably long overdue. But we are certainly not done. There is a lot more need out there. So we'll be continuing with that message of making sure that we are encouraging, advocating for adequate investments in water infrastructure. It's just so very critical, as you all know. So unless there are any questions, I'm also not going to read through these. They haven't changed since we had our last work session, but happy to answer any questions that you have. Continue on. Oh, it is right back to me. So these will, our Clean Water Services federal priorities for 2023 are the more specific items and areas that we anticipate engaging in the coming year. Many of these, again, will be familiar to you as there are some carryovers from last federal legislative agenda in that process, including, of course, advancing seismic modifications for Scoggins Dam, ongoing advocacy around investing in our nation's infrastructure. And then, again, many of these are carryovers. We did expand that last bullet point to support funding for agricultural conservation incentives and programs in anticipation of the Farm Bill. So we do anticipate that we will be engaging in conversations where there are incentive programs that have an impact on water quality and wildlife habitat. And unless there are any questions on this slide, we can move forward.
Seeing no questions, we'll now turn to the state agenda, which is its own separate document, also included in the packet. Again, we've worked to create a document that provides legislators and the community with an understanding of what the county's needs are from our partnership with the state. Throughout the document, we have focused on how we can help our community build and thrive in partnership with the state, community, service providers, and fellow local governments. That is how we explain who we are. From there, we've developed general principles that service across all service areas, 5 priorities for the county, and then department and service level principles that allow us to be flexible because we aren't the only ones with ideas and we need to react. And we need to react with your guidance. And then Clean Water Services has their guiding principle and then their priorities at the state level, and again, contact information for you and for all of your lobbyists. Instead of including multiple slides with all of the principles, we've just placed the priorities in this packet or within this PowerPoint presentation. These really focus in what our short-term needs are in order to do what it is the county needs to accomplish to support the community and where they are. We focused on the things that have been assessed to be our highest and greatest needs in order to meet the expectations of the communities. And that requires us having the resources, not just financial, but in workforce, but also specific investments in a couple of our capital needs to make sure that we have sufficient funding to do all of the work, not just of building the buildings, but doing the work inside those buildings. With that, I will turn it over to Tracy.
Great. The Clean Water Services state priorities for 2023 are listed on this slide. The only change that has been made to this slide since we last met in work session I guess that was about a week ago, is to that bullet item number 4. We put a little bit of additional detail around what we are intending when we say that we are going to engage in infrastructure readiness. And that is looking to support potential industrial expansion. So as you all know, we need to be prepared, and infrastructure does not usually get built very quickly. So we want to make sure that we are part of those conversations going into the legislative session. Aside from that, there have been no changes made since the last work session to this slide. So unless there are any questions, I will pass it back over to Erin.
And with that, we are very proud to be your government relations team. We have appreciated the work that you have put into making this agenda holistically represent both the county and Clean Water Services. I would also like to thank the leadership at the county for their feedback and the process of working with the GR team as we've developed our processes as a new team. And also all of the department leadership that has really influenced and informed us of what the needs are at the county, and all of the outside folks that we have had the opportunity to talk to about what the potential legislative agenda could look like. And with that, Tracy and I are happy to answer the question, but on behalf of the GR team, we thank you for your time and attention through all of the iterations of this legislative agenda.
Before I turn it over to the board for any last questions or comments, for the sake of our viewing audience, I do want to add or reiterate that we have a great government relations team across Washington County and Clean Water Services, and they actually talk and work together too. So earlier, as Tracy was mentioning the Farm Bill, Washington County also has an interest on behalf of our community in the Farm Bill, not only with regard to agriculture, food production, but also for nutrition assistance for our community members. So they've come to us in the last 3 months in work session to discuss ideas and proposals, which has led us to this point where we have the final draft for adoption. So commissioners, are there any questions or other comments you'd like to make? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you very much to both of you for the work that you've presented here, and to the entire team for the work that's gone into this. And quickly, I just want to reflect on what's happened over the past 4 years and the changes that I've seen in the approach to government relations here at Washington County. I so value the fact that we have an internal team that works closely with us. I feel so much more engaged in this agenda, understand where and when I can make a difference as well. So my appreciation goes to the entire team, and it's going to be a good session. So a lot of work, but a long and good session. Thank you.
Two quick comments. One, for our viewing audience, as the chair mentioned, this isn't the first night we've looked at this, and so we've poured over this and came to conclusions, so that's why we don't have lots of questions. The second thing is that I would echo Commissioner Teresa's comments. You're really doing a good job. But for those of you who looked at it, a lot of verbiage on some pages, this is, even though it's a lot of work, this was the easy part. The difficult part's going down and obtaining some of these things. So armor up, and I know you'll do a good job, and we're proud of you.
Yeah, I'd second that. Your hard work is yet to come. You know that. It's a long session. So we'll provide you with goodies and donuts and, I don't know, coffee, I think, is probably what you're going to need a lot of. And then June, we'll talk about whatever else you might need.
A nap.
But thank you for your work. You're doing a great job.
Well, and with all those comments, commissioners, what are the wishes with regard to adopting the 2023 federal legislative agenda and the 2023 state legislative agendas for the two agencies?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 5-0. Woohoo!
Thank you all.
Job
you
well
again.
done, everyone, and that includes our departments and working with our government relations staff members to practice the art of the possible. Next, we have a more formal inside kind of topic, and it's for the adoption of an administrative manual. And for this, Ms. Tanya Angie, our great county administrative officer, will be taking us through a presentation for this subject.
So thank you, Chair, for that intro. And this is actually an exciting item. So Clerk Moss, if you can pull the presentation up. You don't have the presentation?
I do not have your presentation.
Okay. It's in the packet.
We will get it pulled up for you momentarily.
Thank you. So while we're waiting, I'm just going to start talking because this is so exciting. So what we're going, this is just a brief presentation, and actually I believe it was Commissioner Fye that had suggested this. And the reason why is, well, this is an administrative manual. Really, what this manual lays out is how does the county operate? What is the structure of departments? And so sometimes the county, many different services, that can be really complex and confusing for a community. So I appreciate that suggestion, Commissioner Fye. So tonight we're just going to briefly touch on how this connects to Design the Future, the steps we've taken through the development of this administrative manual sections, and then just really asking for the board for a motion to approve. So the purpose of the administrative manual is actually outlined in code. And I do want to read this because we followed code and align that with the development of the manual. I also want to note that upon starting with the county, this is one of the areas that Brad Anderson, a senior county counsel, sorry, I forgot Brad's title for a minute, had raised as a concern that we didn't have an administrative manual that was really following the spirit of the code. What we've had to date is an org chart on our website. So the administrative manual per code shall prescribe the title of each head of department, the duties and responsibilities of each head of department, and the duties and responsibilities of offices, agencies, and personnel not assigned to the department and under the supervision of the county administrator. So how does this link to the One Washington County roadmap? Clerk Moss, are we closer? Okay, 1 second, because I do want to show for the public the One Washington County roadmap. Okay, I'm going to skip past that and we'll go back to that slide and I'll just touch on that slide. So what's the process that we've been through? So staff have worked with each department, really looking at what is the structure of your department, what are the key service areas that are provided. That actually took quite a bit of time. To work through that process. We completed that in spring of 2022 and then had individual briefings with each of the commissioners. We had robust discussions during those briefings, many follow-up questions. I know there was a desire to add more reference to ORS and be really clear within the administrative manual. And so we've taken all of that feedback and included that feedback into the final manual, which is before your board. And here we are at the final step of consideration of your board for approval. So the key sections within the manual, oh, thank you, Clerk Moss. So if we can go to, I'm going to pause there, and if we can go to the design, the One Washington County roadmap. Next slide. Next slide. There, great. As your board has seen before, and I do want to highlight this One Washington County roadmap for members of the public. We are leading to a One Washington County. What One Washington County really means is balancing the diverse needs of our county and our departments and service delivery together, better together as a county. One of the components, and you see this on the right, is design the future. Here at Washington County, we are going to continue to design the future. And so what does that mean? We'll continue to evolve the county's culture, systems, structures, and processes. And that's through a spirit of collaboration, transparency, and openness. This document, the administrative manual, is one portion of that transparency to our community as far as what is our department structure and operations. We centered our decision-making and our operations with equity. It's very intentional that equity is in the middle of the road and joining the two. And then our board provides, and now I'm on the far lane, provides policy direction through board initiatives. We're working through service level assessment, and the board is discussing next steps in revising the current community strategic plan. Thank you, Clerk Moss. Can we move forward to the next slide? I already talked about the timeline, so let's move forward. Next slide. So now I'll go back to the sections of the administrative manual. Next slide, please. So the sections include an organizational chart and reporting structure, departments, offices, which includes title of the department, office head, description of the department, office duties and responsibilities. And then there's other details of policy and procedure included. Next slide. So the organizational chart, this is not a reporting structure necessarily to me, or who reports to the assistant county administrators for a portfolio. Ultimately, we are responsible to our Washington County community. The chart includes our elected. So, of course, your Board of Commissioners, we heard from our independent elected auditor this evening, District Attorney, Justice of the Peace, and Sheriff. And then your board has two appointed officials, and that's the County Administrator, myself, and County Counsel Tom Carr. And then really by resolution, the only position that is required to report directly to me, and this is through the equity resolution, is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. And then within our structure, I do have assistant county administrators to really help support our departments and the management of the organization. And so listed below by functional area, the functional areas is how we have our budget laid out. And so there you'll see the different departments that are within each of those functional areas. Next slide. So where to find the administrative manual? So you can do quick search, which I find very handy on our website and works very well. And then also you can use the pull down from the government pull down tab to find this information. Next slide. So at this point, I would entertain any questions from your board and would ask if your board would consider a motion to adopt the administrative manual by resolution and order. I will note if there's any change in the manual, this would come back before the board for any updates moving forward.
You're right, Miss Angie. This is way more interesting than just saying we're following code 2.04.110. It is certainly more meaningful to all of us here on the elected board as well as to the over 2,700 employees of Washington County. So commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on this tonight?
No, my only comment would be, great job. You started from scratch and brought this to fruition in 2 years? Year and a half? How long you been with us?
Since August 24th of 2020.
All right. So good job on that.
I was
We need
hoping
this.
you'd have another word, and that is move for approval.
Move for approval.
I didn't mean to cut off other comments. Well, how better else to give our vote of confidence and approval to our CAO's management than to adopt this administrative manual. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raising your hand. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you,
'Cause
Commissioners.
I wanted to say aye instead of raising my hand. This is my milestone.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Angie, to you and all of the staff for bringing this to a conclusion for us. All righty. The third and final action on the action subsection today is, unfortunately, to declare an emergency, but it's really not so bad. Here with us tonight, we have our subject matter experts who will introduce themselves in a moment, but the topic is the Hillsboro Bridge Shelter and needing a new roof. Please take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. For the record, my name is Laurel Brown. I'm the Division Manager of Facilities and Park Services. I don't know if you can hear me now. There we go. Now I'm on there. So we are here today to ask you to declare Hillsboro Bridge Shelter Roof Replacement an emergency, to ratify County Administrator Declaration, and to approve award of contract without a competitive process to address the emergency. So just very briefly, this is a property that we acquired in early 2021 with the intent of using it as a respite location for our COVID reopening plan. It was purchased through largely through state funds provided by the Oregon legislature, about $6.2 million that ran through Project Turnkey in their efforts to repurpose hotels, motels, and the like for non-congregate shelters. Due diligence was performed at that time under the purview of Project Turnkey in order to satisfy state conditions for funding. By March, so very quickly, we were able to receive a building inspection that was conducted by a property exam. That inspection indicated that the roof was 5 to 7 years old with approximately 15 years of useful life remaining. So today, or almost today, back in October, we had reason to believe during we were conducting repairs to a room that required us to open the ceiling, and we saw conditions that concerned us, and so facilities requested to have an engineer look at the roof, and it was found to be severely deteriorated, and that it presented an immediate life safety risk to individuals occupying that second floor of the facility. That roof replacement was going to require relocation of 19 individuals sheltering at the facility, so a vulnerable population, right, as we're moving into winter. The overall risk and the interruption to operations of the shelter necessitated an ask to county administrator to declare an emergency and allow direct appointment of the award without a competitive bid process to expedite the repairs. Currently, staff are in active conversation with Oregon Community Foundation, which is the organization that administers the project turnkey funds, to ask questions about the inspection and the failed roof and how can we partner in moving forward. So because of the collaboration within the county between several departments, procurement, county council, HHS, and Ms. Angie, we are able to kick off this roof work as soon as December 19th. So that is really record time in this environment. And our current anticipated end date is February 7th. I will not pin my hat to the 7th. We'll say early February 2023. So hopefully we have done everything we can to mitigate impacts to the folks sheltering in those locations. And with that, I will turn it over to Josh to talk about the shelter program updates.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. Josh Kreitz for the record. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department. I'm going to speak briefly just about some of how we've kind of been handling the impact at the programmatic level. As you may recall, this program is operated by Greater Good Northwest. They've been doing a great job over there for us. And again, it's 50 bridge shelter rooms and 10 COVID respite rooms. We still are operating 10 COVID respite rooms. I actually asked program staff today, I was like, they said we had 10 of them full just like a week or two ago, just to give you an idea. So programs open during construction. So the program capacity will shift to address construction needs. 22 rooms will be moved off-site to the Forest Grove Best Western, where Greater Good Northwest, our provider, will do services there. Just to give you a current understanding of where we're at with occupancy, 27 of the 28 remaining shelter rooms are occupied at the site. We have 14 off-site, so we're still searching for 8 more. But no one lost housing. I want to make sure everyone's clear about that. So right now, whereas normally we'd be operating at 50 out of 50 shelter beds, we're at 41 out of 50. That's because we're looking for some extra capacity. So we'll continue to focus on building that up while the repairs are being made. This afternoon or this evening, we're obviously requested action is to declare Hillsboro Bridge Shelter roof replacement an emergency, ratify county administrator's declaration, and approve award of contract without a competitive process to address the emergency in the amount of $496,432 through a resolution and order. And that brings us to a slide around questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, just one quick one. First of all, congratulations for getting any contractor in that short a period of time. That's a record. But and I don't know if it's a Josh question or not, but the price we're paying with that speed, is it a fair price? I mean, I didn't get to ask that at work session, but is it a good price meaning that it's market value? This isn't some premium payment we're paying or anything?
I don't mind answering that question. We were able to go with a roofer that is familiar to the county, and I think that the price is comparable to other projects that we have bid recently, and it is not my belief that we're paying a premium. That's not my experience.
Go ahead, Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. I have 2 questions, and both questions are to the both of you. First one, Laura, for you. This is the second roofing problems I'm hearing, right, as a commissioner, and both of them were sort of like in an emergency manner. First one being the jail, and then now this. I'm wondering if there is a plan or if there is a process in place or project in place around assessing any county properties around any roofing issues? So is there a comprehensive sort of needs assessment based on any other potential roofing that could come about? And then the other question I had, probably directed to you, Josh, is the Aloha Inn, which hasn't been named, so we're still calling it Aloha Inn. Could this be a problem? Or has the roof been assessed by sort of some commissioned, like what Laura was saying around facilities and park commissioning and outside contractors to do a thorough assessment so that we're not, as soon as we open and let people in, we're not in this situation?
Actually, Ms. Brown, I want to take the condition question of roofs. So Commissioner Fye, I am fully confident that we have more roof and HVAC issues at the county than than this site as well as the jail. The condition assessment index that Laurel had spoke to is really a comprehensive look at our facilities, roofs, HVAC, those buildings, for us to then align into a CIP to plan for these projects so that we prevent this situation in the future. So the condition index assessment process we're going through will help us identify what other issues there are. Ms. Brown had shared with me the HVAC issues that we see in those critical facilities, the 24/7, 365 facilities. We actually may have HVACs in other buildings in the county go down first because we don't have that full assessment. However, those are not buildings that are housing people. It may be an office building. And so we really need to complete that condition index assessment so we have a comprehensive view and we can work with your board on prioritizing those. So I don't want to take that away from Ms. Brown, but I also want to recognize the position that Ms. Brown has stepped into in the county and her leadership in lifting these issues up. And so my response is just from the perspective of supporting and amplifying the work that she and her team are doing.
Commissioner Fye, on your second question, so our development consultant, Bronner and Company, went in and did a capital needs assessment. So before we brought the general contractor on to address any of the needs and any of the rehab needs for the building. So the roof was deemed that we can move forward with the building without replacing it at this time. And then we have a capital needs plan for for that development moving forward. So.
But it sounds like that same process was applied to the bridge shelter, yet it came back. I'm just suspicious of if we might need to. So I don't, not that I'm doubting the work that is done, but similar process happened, and then now we're in this declaring an emergency and need $500,000. So you're confident that the roof is okay once people in it.
Let's give Ms. Brown an opportunity to address your question.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. I think that there is a slight nuance between the two processes that apply to the 622 building, the Hillsboro Bridge Shelter. That inspection was not a thorough inspection. That's the kind of inspection that happens when you purchase a home or any property where they don't do any deconstruction, no demolition. It's all what you can see surface level. And if you've ever had to sign those papers, there's a lot of, we're not responsible for anything that we can't see underneath the membrane or behind the walls. And so that is the extent of what was done at the Hillsboro Bridge Shelter. My understanding at the Aloha Inn is that there has been quite a lot of construction there, and the kind of deterioration that we experienced at Hillsboro Bridge Shelter would have been revealed during that remodel. of the LOA.
Yeah, and I should be clear, we're not saying the roof is new. We're not saying the roof won't need replacement in several years, but for the time being, we don't anticipate bringing forward any action on the roof.
Thank you both, and thank you, Tanya.
Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
I got to follow up with where Commissioner Fry was going on this. It seems to me that we have an inspection of a building that presumably was an outside organization that did that inspection. They deemed it to have 15 years more life. It lasted 18 months. That just is, to me, highly questionable. And so who's going to pay the $469,000? Where do you get that money?
Currently, my understanding is that the funding for the replacement of the roof on the front end is coming from SHS funds. Beyond that, I would look to County Council to advise what our options are. I know that we, like I mentioned during the presentation, we are in conversation with the company that solicited the inspection, and they are supportive of us, right? They're on our side, and so they are open to that conversation about how we can work to make this right.
Commissioner Willie, I've reached out to the Oregon Community Foundation, and Greg Wyman and I both have had conversations with OCF and the contractor who they brought on board. So those conversations are active, and we're having those right now. And I believe County Council, Greg was working with Courtney and County Council to further those conversations about what options we have. So those are active and going, and we'll report back to the County Administrative Office.
Okay, well, yeah, I think it's just incumbent on us to ask more questions rather than because we have the funding from SHS that we just write the checks. So, and Commissioner Rogers, Carlson Roofing, by the way, I got to think where I am here. The building that's right in front of where your car is parked over there, they did that roof, I don't know, a year ago or so. So they're very quality contractor, and they've done work for the county before.
Yeah. So thank you, commissioners, for your questions. I just have a clarifying question. With the, I appreciate that in the resolution that we have in our packet, you talked about how the I'm not going to remember the right words, but the plywood needs to be, yes, the decking and all that needs to be replaced. If my memory serves me right, and it might not, the bridge shelter itself, the Hillsboro Bridge Shelter, there's 2 buildings that offer the rooms. Will the roof on both buildings be done, or is it just the roof on one of the 2 buildings? I can't remember.
It is the roof on both buildings. The roof that we started with is the one that was considered to be at risk. The contract that we have is for both buildings.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
Of similar ages.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you. And as questions were being asked about funding and whatnot, I was reminded that the reason why we're in this emergency phase and making sure that we can get this fixed right away is because these units are housing people. And it's really important that each and every room in our portfolio is able to meet the needs of our community. Because as we all know, we need more housing here in Washington County of all types, but especially for our most vulnerable at-risk individuals, to try and get more people off of living on the streets or homeless in any way and into stable housing. So with that, commissioners, I would ask for a motion to declare the Hillsboro Bridge Shelter roof replacement an emergency and ratify the County Administrator Declaration and approve the award for contract without a competitive process to address the emergency.
Chair Harrington, I would like to make that motion, and I also wanted to add exactly what you said. This is about people. This is about making sure that we identify that this is an emergency so that we continue to do the good work that you're doing. So thank you, and I move to accept.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, so here we are at our second public comment period of the evening. And you may have noticed earlier when a gentleman was engaging with us and he asked for questions, I was caught a little off guard. I thought he was going to go right into the second resolution that he shared with us. So sorry if I stumbled there for everyone, and hopefully I won't be off my game for the second public comment period of this evening.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Would any members of our attendees in this auditorium wish to provide comment for up to 5 minutes on any county-related topic? Didn't see anyone signed up before. Do not see anyone coming up. Would any members in our online attendees wish to provide public comment on any county-related topic for up to 5 minutes? Give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands. Chair Harrington.
All righty then. Next, we'll move on to board announcements. This was our last formal meeting of this year of 2022. We will not be having board meetings for the next 2 Tuesdays. We hope everyone enjoys the break. Then we're into a brand new year. The very first week of January, on Tuesday, January 3rd, we will have the ceremonial swearing in of new Board of Commission members starting at 9 a.m. in the morning. Then we'll get right down to business. We'll have our Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting right here in the Public Services Building Auditorium starting at 10 a.m. After that, we'll have our board business meeting, and our work session will convene at 1 in the afternoon. On Thursday, January 5th, we will have our first board roundtable of the new year. That'll start at 9 a.m. over in our work session room. The following Tuesday, January 10th, we'll have our work session starting at 9 a.m. And then we will be having a joint meeting of the Washington County Fair Board and the Board of Commissioners at 1 p.m. On Tuesday, January 17th, we will have a work session starting at 9, a board meeting at 10, and then reconvene the work session in the afternoon after the lunch break. And then we have another special meeting on Friday, January 20th, where the board will be meeting with the Housing Advisory Committee for our annual housing forum that will start at 9. Then our last set of meetings for the month of January will be Tuesday, January 24th, with a work session in the afternoon starting at 2 and a board meeting at 6:30 p.m. Are there any other board announcements for today? No, seeing none. I think from everyone here on the board, we're wishing everyone a good remainder of your month of December, and we hope you have a nice break over those 2 weeks. We look forward to working with all of you into the new year and serving our community in a brand new year. And please, everyone, stay healthy in these next few weeks. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning the Board of Commissioners meeting of Tuesday, December 13th, 2022, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. See you next year, folks.